Hello guys and girls, how you going? Mark Hummer here, and today what we're talking about is various ways of taking photos and lighting. Now I'm sure you can probably hear from the surrounding noise, it's raining today. It's a cold, grey, nasty little rainy day. What do they say here in Queensland? Perfect one day, grey and miserable the next. Well, today is one of those days, so I thought I'd put up with it anyway and make use of the fact I had nothing much to do and make a few videos for you, and I hope you find them interesting and enlightening. So I'll be talking about various things such as one-handed photography, which is an interesting idea, various lighting options for when you're doing a video or a YouTube show, and also the various different panels and lighting that I choose, and lenses. So there'll be a variety of stuff discussed. I hope you find it enlightening. I hope you can actually hear me correctly over the rain. I'm sorry about it, we have like a tin shed roof here, so it is a bit of a racket, but all in all, I'm sure you can see here that by doing it outside in the rain, I'm illustrating that you can pretty much do anything anywhere. You just got to be determined. Now it's quite interesting, this subject, because I've brought it up many times before, and that is lighting, whether you're doing photography or videography. And as you know, I do like to experiment with my lighting, call some of my rigs like Frankenstein's monsters rigs because they're so bizarrely configured. But I like to experiment, you see, try different types of globes and mounts and arrangements, and we're going to discuss a little bit of that today. But predominantly what I'd like to talk to you about, if I may, is flash photography and one-handed camera holding. Now initially you might think holding a camera with one hand, isn't that counterproductive? Surely you need two to steady it. Well, it's true. If you've got the option to hold it with two hands or even use a tripod or a monopod, that's a much better option. Certainly a lot safer to guarantee stability. But I can tell you from practical experience over the last several years, I've now started almost exclusively, and I'd say 90% of the time I take all of my portrait photos, that is, one-handed. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'll just get some gear out here. I'll choose the right camera bag first. We've got a flash. As you know, I love these flash benders, so I've got one of those as well. And a DSLR. Now I'm filming at the moment with my D810, which is what I take most of my photos on, but I'm using the wife's camera right now just to illustrate purposes, and it's still a big DSLR. I've got a prime lens on. It's an 85 f1.8, and the reason I've got this lens on I'll illustrate a little further later. But if I could just configure this for you in front of you so you know how I go about it and why I choose what I do. So firstly, most of my photography is taken at around, we're talking portraits here, we're talking about f2.2 to about 2.8. I don't go f4 or 5 or greater if I can do a portrait, because usually too much information is in focus and I'm trying to isolate the subject. So I like a little bit of shallow depth of field, yeah, that's great, but it's as much about making the actual subject themselves stand out and pop. That's what I'm excited about. See, to me, having a shallow depth of field but bad lighting means what you've got is everything a little bit blurry and only maybe the eyes sharp, and to me that's not an attractive picture. So I like to actually isolate the subject away from the background. If you can blur it out, that's great, but more importantly is making the subject pop and be well lit. So how do I go about that? Well, first what I do is I'm fortunate enough on this Nikon camera here to have a little pop-up flash. Now I'd never advise the pop-up flash directly because it's too harsh and strong. But what it is terrific for, however, in this situation, is with using a slight little diffuser here, and it's like a Gary Fong Puffer Plus, that's what I'm using. They're very, very cheap. I mean, you get them for a handful of dollars on eBay, so only piece of plastic. So they're very lightweight to carry around, but they do a great job of diffusing the light on the pop-up flash. And what I'm using here is the pop-up flash solely as a way of triggering my main flash here, the speed light I'll be carrying. So how do we work that? Well, you choose in your menu. If you go into your menu options, you'll have options of light power on your pop-up flash. And I've elected that this one be, for this illustrated purposes today, on 1/8 power. But very often I'll have that right down to 1/32, even 128th of its power. Because really it's not so much about this light providing a great deal of fill, although it does provide a bit of useful fill directly on. But more important than anything, it signifies to the client themselves that I've taken a photo because the flash has gone off, which is always handy, and myself I can see that, so I know everything's functioning. But secondly, it does trigger the flash here, so that's very handy. So what you do with the flash here is we've got several options. This is a speed light. It's a SB910, and what I'm going to do is not just going to have it just turned on, the first setting, I'm going to have it turned to the remote setting. So I don't want this mastering anything because it's not controlling. This is the slave of this unit here. So the camera is actually the master. So what will happen now is when the pop-up flash is on, it will now activate this at any power I've designated. Now I've designated it at 50%, half power. And that's 90% of what I use, because full strength is way too strong, particularly at the proximity that I'm taking photos at. So when you're only maybe 3 meters away from the subject, the last thing you want is to blast a powerful flash like this at them, and you just wipe them out, and that sort of defeats the whole purpose. So really, because I'm taking photos very often outside, and there's natural light anyway, I'm only really wanting to shape the light with the flash. So it's not the entire light source as if you're in a studio in a dark room or something. This is outside where it's useful, and you want to create a side angle of directional light in that way. So how do I do this? Well, look, it's very simple to put these together. I've shown them in other videos before, but I've got the diffuser panel on this flash bender from Rogue. You simply slot it in the bottom here. It has a little tongue, and the tongue just goes over there. And these two little pieces of material come together with a little slot. It's got a bit of Velcro there to attach it all, and it's very quick. You just tighten it up, and there you have it. You've got it all connected up, and it looks great. It'll work fine. So here we are. We've got a little pop-up diffuse little panel, and that'll give a beautiful soft light on the subject. As you see, it's quite a large panel. I mean, really, that's about twice the size of an iPad, and diffused like that, it gives a beautiful soft light. You don't have to have them that big. I choose them that big simply because I have it, and I think with a big flash and a big diffuser gives a nice softbox sort of effect. But just as I can illustrate here in my wife's camera bag, you can get them a smaller size too, and that's more comfortable for her. So she has a smaller flash, she has a smaller unit, and she can hold that up, get a very similar effect, but it's very comfortable for her body weight. So I'm using the big one today because I have it. Remember, I forgot all the settings right, and so how do I take these photos one-handed, you might ask? Well, it's really actually quite simple. And you know, the key point, before I take any photos and show you anything, really what I want to illustrate here is that it's about the ratio of the camera and its balance. You see, if you've got a DSLR, unlike a mirrorless, they're a little bit heavy. You've got a bit of weight to them. And that to me is great, especially as a man, and I'm not a small man. So, you know, I like to have a bit of weight in my hand. I can certainly lift that up, and I don't have any difficulty with that. I don't use a vertical grip, I just don't need it. I find that I'm quite comfortable one-handed operation, and the camera feels very well balanced like this. So having all the weight central and having a lighter lens, and I'm using a prime of course, so I'm not using like a 70 to 200 and trying to perform this. That would be weighted way too forward and heavy, and would pull down and would make holding it very awkward. In fact, what you'd be doing is you'd be straining your wrist because of all the weight pulling down. So by using a light prime lens, which you should be anyway if you're doing portraits, that's the ideal procedure, you'll find that the balance is good, because this one here is particularly made of mostly plastic, and so therefore it's pretty light. So I find the balance is great. Most of the weight now, if you can see it just balancing in my hand, I can hold it with one finger, and you see how it's pretty much balancing perfectly straight. So you wouldn't have any problem with holding that. I can hold that all day, either way, this way, or even just hanging it from the grip. Never drop the camera, don't worry about that. Don't need camera straps and mounts or anything. You find that once you've got a comfortable grip on it, it's actually very easy to hold. I'm not finding that heavy or discomfortable in any way at all. The flash itself, because it's just a small unit, and this flash bender weighs next to nothing, it's only a bit of material after all for the most part, this doesn't weigh anything either. So it's quite comfortable to hold. So what I can do now is I gain my focus and take a photo, and you may notice there that both the lights went off simultaneously. Now, when I'm taking a photo, I'm not going to hold it like this. When I'm taking a photo, say for a portrait mode, what I'm going to be doing is using this as a fill, of course, very softly tuned, but then I'll have this one way out to the side, if you can pick that up. So what I'm trying to do is having it not like this or close to the camera, but as far out as I can stretch it, and tilted into the subject, depending how close they are. Obviously, if they're a long way away, you've got it a bit flatter, but if they're a bit further in, you're going to have it angled in. So up and out and angled, and take another shot, and you can see how they both went off there, and you can shape that any way you like. Now, of course, you pretty much look, well, because I'm right-handed, of course, when I take a photo, I'm pretty much limited to always having the flash on my left hand, but that's fine. That's no problem at all. It's just a matter of getting used to the photos and the look you're going to get. But I wanted to show you this because a lot of people think, oh, you know, you've really got to try and hold it still, and if you're not really holding it still and pressing it into the body, and you're going to have a blurry photo. Well, look, I can tell you right now, holding it like this with one hand, I don't get any blurry photos. Maybe 1 in 25 photos might have a little bit of motion blur. 90% of that, actually, I might even add, is usually the subject moving. And they can't help it, you know, they're a model and they're a bit nervous and they're not sure what they're supposed to do, so they can get a bit twitchy. So that's mostly where the blur comes from, not actually from the camera. In fact, what you do is, if you have it at a reasonable shutter speed too, that's going to help a lot. So I have mine set at, let's say I've got it at f2.5 as an illustration, and I might have the shutter speed at 250th of a second, which is the maximum setting I can have when I'm using the flash setup. So that syncs well for me, and I find that I don't get any motion blur at all. So with the lighting, of course, the other beauty of having your lighting and you're projecting at your subject, you're not having to worry about very low shutter speeds trying to suck light in. A, you've got the aperture set right to let some light in, but secondly, you're projecting plenty of light at the subject, and therefore you're not having to worry about your shutter speed being low and introducing motion blur from that reason. So these are basically the setups I use, and I find that's a very great skill to accomplish. I recommend everybody to try it at least a couple of times. I mean, the first couple of times a bit awkward, don't give up, pursue with it. Because if you can bring your own lighting on any situation, it's so less cumbersome. This doesn't take up any room, and it's so quick just to fold down and put in your bag. You put it in your bag, that's gone. You can have a shoulder bag the same, it'll fold up in that. Remember, this thing here does collapse up. So you can put it into a little shoulder bag or strap it to your side, and it doesn't have to be intrusive to your movement and going around. You can walk around all day in a park with someone with very little stuff with you indeed, if you wish it. So, you know, lighting is essential, and this is really where I'm coming from today. I'm using a lot of lighting now. I've taken a photo of this rig, so I'm going to put that up there in a minute, and you'll see it flash up, and that'll illustrate what I'm looking at from my perspective and how much light I use. And I do like a lot of light.